That's just amazing to me. That is absolutely amazing to me. And I will submit to you that sometimes in your life, you get to feel, no, you get to know that this is exactly where I'm supposed to be at this point, at this time in my life, and it's not all about me. A few years ago, I had to accept that I had been living in a bubble, and that it was time for me to burst out of that bubble and do something that was bigger than me, that wasn't all about me, but could not happen without me. I'm in the process right now of living what I'm very comfortable calling the JFK moment of my life. I'd like to talk with you all today a little about what I'm doing in public education that I believe is going to help address one of the biggest challenges facing businesses globally right now, specifically the recruiting and retention of talent. I'm in the process of making a huge alternative investment in human capital, and I'll never make a dime. But I do believe this investment will pay huge dividends for the future of our country, the world, and companies like that. I'm currently doing a tour of high schools, middle schools, and upper-level elementary schools all across the country. My initial goal was I wanted to do 100 schools. I thought, man, that'd be a big thing. We blew through that number. Blew through that number before I knew it, and then the pandemic hit. We had to make what I call a hard pivot from doing live events to using technology. As a result of that, last year we did 435 schools. And this whole idea, let me define a hard pivot. Meaning, something that you would have never chosen, but you still gotta make it work. Think about it for a second. If you had gone into senior management at your company in January of 2020 and said, I got this great idea. We're gonna do everything remotely starting tomorrow. You wouldn't be in this room right now. You'd be driving Uber. And when I'm with young people, I share with them the three most important decisions that I ever made in my life, all of which I made at their age or younger, all of which made the rest of my life possible. I also share with them the greatest gift that I ever got in my life, which was permission to dream. And if I do this right, many of us will feel like we've been in some of the same places and spaces. Clearly at different points in time, different cities, same circumstances, different streets, same situations. This space that we're all in right now, none of us chose this space. With that previous definition of a hard pivot in mind, this is not, for many of us, our first hard pivot. When I look back at my own personal punch list of hard pivots, this is what it looks like for me. Abandoned child, foster care, mom in prison, never met my father, domestic violence survivor, sexual assault survivor, never went to college, veteran, homeless, single parent, entrepreneur, and Black. And I said Black last because I got this free. This is the original packaging right here, okay? If there's ever a job posting where they say the ideal candidate must be able to stand and deliver in a volatile, turbulent, dysfunctional environment, I'm gonna get that job. I'm gonna be the boss of that. And I will submit to you again, maybe some of those check marks that I referenced earlier don't apply to you. But looking around this room, I know for a fact this is not many of our first hard pivots. Your hard pivot could have been the loss of a job, a medical issue or health challenge, the loss of a loved one. I will submit to you all further that we're all living in the same space right now chronologically. We may be in different places politically, geographically, emotionally, spiritually, but chronologically, we're all living in the same space. It's something that I call atomic time. And I'll come back to that point a little later. But I must stress, I am not talking about some apocalyptic end of days time scenario, but rather the fact that all of us have had to make many changes in all of our lives, none of which we chose. 3 things are certain about this atomic time. Number 1, we've all had to make major changes in our lives. Number 2, none of us knows how long these changes are going to be with us. And number 3, we're all going to come out of this with some new scar tissue. And scar tissue is beautiful. I say that because scar tissue is the signature of survival. The single most important decision that I ever made in my life, I made it as a 5-year-old boy. That decision didn't just change my life. That decision changed the lives of my yet to have been born children and my grandchild. That one decision had generational impact. That singularly is the most important decision that I ever made in my life, which was, when I grow up, become a man, and have children, my children are going to know who their father is. When I made that one decision to break that one link in that chain of cycles that have plagued my family, breaking that one link in child abandonment, allowed me to break all of the other associated links, including child abuse, domestic violence, alcoholism, illiteracy, fear, powerlessness, and generational poverty. Let me say that another way. I made the decision that if I had to sleep in the public washroom with my child tied on my back as a 30-year-old man, I made that decision as a 5-year-old boy. And a major difference between reality and the film. In the film, you all saw James Smith play my son as a 5-year-old. In reality, at this point in our lives, my son was 14 months old. He was still in diapers. And speaking of diapers, is that not just the most beautiful little chocolate baby boy in the world? And no, that is not my son, that is me. That is me, man, 67 years ago. And it took me a long time to realize the only person I could be looking at to make me smile like that is her. My mother, Betty Jean. Man, those eyes and that smile could either melt your heart or turn you into a pillar of salt. I have both experiences. Sony spent, again, $100 million on marketing that movie, and every place we went around the world, I talked about my mother. The wit, the wisdom, the lessons of love that she shared with me made everything that I've ever done in my life possible. Whenever I am asked, whatever made you think that you could accomplish half of the things that you have in your life, I can hear my mother's voice. I can hear Mama say, son, I've had to do so much with so little for so long that I can do anything with nothing. But that wasn't just something Katie said. I saw her do it. I thank God every day that I had one of those old-fashioned mothers who told me every day, son, you can do or be anything. And I believed it, because that was permission to dream. And it's very important that I share with you what she did not say. She did not say that you could have anything. She did not say that you could buy anything. She did not say that you're guaranteed, assured, owed, or entitled to anything. She said that you could do or be anything. And for me, man, that was an even bigger statement. Because if you could do or be anything, all this other stuff will come. Again, that was the greatest gift I ever got in my life, because that was permission to dream. I had that vision crystallized, amplified. For me, one night as a young man, when I heard Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. speak, as a matter of fact, it was the last speech he ever gave in his life. He was assassinated the very next day. He was speaking with a group of municipal employees, garbage men, down in Memphis, Tennessee. And his message to those men that night was, whatever you're going to do with your life, you should seek to become the best at it. I believe his exact words were, if you're going to be a garbage man, you should seek to become the best garbage man and sweep speech like Shakespeare wrote poetry. And right there, I made the second most important decision that I've ever made in my life. That decision was, I'm going to become world-class at whatever I do with my life. Not good at it, not pretty good at it, but world-class at it. And let's define world-class and keep it simple. Right now in your industry, right now there's a conversation going on and the question has come up, who's the best in the business? Somebody ought to say your name. Same conversation, same question. Who's the best in the business? If nobody says your name, then you got work to do. Same conversation, same question. Who's the best in the business? If nobody says your name and you don't care, get out of the business. You'll never be any good. But the ultimate validation in that scenario, when that question comes up, who's the best in the business, the ultimate validation is when someone who does not like you says your name. When the people who will not take your phone calls are now hoping that you'll return their calls. When the folks who would not hire you yesterday cannot afford you today. That's when you know. You know what I do? I don't, but I'm working on it every single day. I am grinding every single day. One of the things that I love spending so much time with young people is that a lot of our students and young people are visual learners. You can say a whole bunch of words, but never reach it. But if you show them a photo or a video or a picture, they connect. I don't spend a lot of time on YouTube, but I did see this one clip that puts into perspective this whole idea of what world-class could look like. Whatever your trade, craft, or job is, this is what world-class could look like. Check this out. And I gotta tell you, every time I see that clip, I keep waiting for the helicopter pilot to miss that shot. He makes it every single time. Out of curiosity, I do some additional research. I find out the helicopter pilot, that was not a he, that was a she. That's what world class could look like. And speaking of world class, man, I am so proud of this young lady. I don't know if you folks learned or heard about it a couple years ago. That young lady became the first African-American female fighter pilot in the history of the United States Navy. That is my name, and I am so proud of her. I gave her a shout out on social media, just basically saying, think about it for a second. Everything that Tom Cruise pretends to do in the movie Top Gun, this young lady does it for real every day. Man, you know, I had somebody on social media come back and call me a racist. I've been called a lot of things in my life, man, but I ain't never been called a racist. I knew as a little boy and a young man that if I wanted to do something that was bigger than what I saw every day, I had to see bigger things. So it made sense to me I can't tell you the exact age I was when I made the third most important decision that I ever made in my life. But I couldn't push the button until I was 18 years old. And that's when I enlisted in the United States Navy. And I've got to tell you something. My entire career on Wall Street, close to 40 years now, was made possible by my time in the U.S. Navy. I mentioned earlier, I never knew my dad. But that's okay because I had these three uncles, Archie, Willie, Henry, all of whom had served in different branches of the United States military. U.S. Army, U.S. Air Force, or the United States Marine Corps. I found out many, many years later the reason that none of them had ever served in the Navy was because none of them could swim. Think about that for a second. The guys who you thought were Superman, Batman, and Robin could not swim. But they made sure that I knew how. And I grew up hearing all these stories about Tokyo, Hong Kong, Singapore, Paris, London, Germany, and I knew, man, going to college was never on my radar. I was going to join the Navy and see the world. Many, many years ago, that was a big, big part of the Navy marketing campaign. Join the Navy, see the world. Man, I joined the Navy to see the world. They sent me to Camp Lejeune, Jacksonville, North Carolina. But I'm okay with that. You know why? Because I now know that's exactly where I was supposed to be at that point, at that place, at that time in my life. Because I met some people I would have never met. I learned some things I would have never learned, and I got some experiences I would have never gotten had I not been there. Skills, talent, and expertise are transferable. The key is transferring those things into doing something that you're truly passionate about. I'll never forget a couple of years ago having this exact conversation with a young man who expressed to me how much he loved cooking. And one day he wanted to become a chef and open his own restaurant. That's a beautiful dream. And it can be done. But I asked him, have you ever considered a career in the military? Man, he looked at me like I had two heads. My point was, think about it for a second. Let's say you're a cook on this ship. That's the USS Abraham Lincoln, built by my friends at Huntington Ingalls. That's one of the largest aircraft carriers in the world. The point is, there are 4,000 sailors on that ship that must be fed 4 times a day. That is 16,000 meals a day. Let's say that ship is at sea for 6 months. Round it off and call it 180 days. How many meals is that? Do the math in your head. You look smart. Tell me, how many meals is that? That is 2,880,000 meals. Meaning, you're not going to just get good at cooking. You're going to get good at time management, asset allocation, and event planning. All of which are part of the critical skill set required to run a successful restaurant or a software company. Skills, talent, and expertise are transferable. My time in the U.S. Navy Hospital Corps was critical to my career on Wall Street. Some kind of way, Camp Lejeune, I became the base proctology specialist. We all understand proctology, right? Let's just say I started at the bottom. 60,000 Marines, that's a lot of bottoms. I got a lot of practice. I got good at my job. Man, I got so good at my job, I could trade an abscess and eat lunch at the same time. I got good at my job. I got so good at my job that by the time I got to Wall Street, they couldn't show me anything I hadn't seen before. I took everything I learned in the U.S. Navy, and I applied those things to the rest of my life, business and personal. I didn't know it, but there were some folks watching, and apparently they thought I did a pretty good job. Every year, the United States Navy Memorial Foundation gives an award to men and women who served and who took everything they learned in their naval careers and used those things for the rest of their lives. Some of the previous recipients include Arnold Palmer, one of the greatest golfers to ever play the game, astronaut and Senator John Glenn, and President John F. Kennedy. But that one right there, that was mine. That was mine, man. That is my Heisman Trophy. You know what? I gotta stop saying that. Because to compare that award with an award for athletic competition would be to disrespect the folks that gave it to you. Would be to diminish what that stands for. You don't get one of those for running and jumping and catching balls. You don't get one of those for singing and dancing. You get one of those for seizing the opportunity to be of service and seeking to create opportunities for others. And I knew as a young man that in order to become world class at something, I had to have what I call a plan A. A dream without a plan A is worthless. A dream with a plan A is priceless. And I will never forget this day. Man, I had just flown 25 hours straight to get from Johannesburg, South Africa, to be in San Francisco, California for the very first day of filming The Pursuit of Happiness. Very first day. And you know what we're filming this day? The end of the movie. That's Hollywood. Nobody will ever know. This is the scene where Will Smith is coming down the stairs. He's got the job. There's no dialogue.
It's called happiness.
You can feel the energy coming through the screen. He squeezes his head like it's a melon. And you can feel all that coming through the screen. That was all made possible because this guy had what he calls, and I call, a plan A. He told me from the very beginning, playing you was going to be harder than playing Muhammad Ali. His point was, everybody knows Ali. They know the stories, they know what happened. Nobody knows you. So for 17 weeks of filming, while everybody else was watching him, he was watching me. How I move, how I express myself, how I show attention. This guy had me down to the point, he has to sign my name to a contract in the film, signs an exact replica of my signature. Man, if I ever have a problem with identity theft, I know who I'm looking for. In my second book, Start Where You Are, I talked about this concept, this idea of having a plan A. And I will submit to you that the best plan A's all have something I call the C5 complex. Your plan A must be clear, concise, compelling, consistent, and committed. You've got to have a plan A. But when you're doing something that you're truly passionate about, there is no plan B. Just a few examples of some folks I know from Chicago. Anybody know that kid? That kid became this guy because he was committed to plan A, not plan B. This little girl became this woman because she was committed to plan A, not plan B. And whatever your politics are, this kid became this man because he was committed to plan A, not plan B. Somebody needs to write this down. No, somebody say this with me. Plan B sucks.
Plan B sucks.
Come on, B, say it one time like you mean it. Plan B sucks. Man, if plan B was any good, it'd be plan A. Plan B distracts from plan A. And some folks might be sitting out there thinking right now, Chris, those were all good examples, but you know what? Those were all young people, and life had knocked them down. They had never had to come back from a serious setback. Yeah? What about this guy? Anybody know him? I bet you've been to his restaurant. He started that company when he was 56 years old. What about this guy? Know him? No? I bet you consumed his product. He created that when he was 58. Everybody knows this guy. What you don't know is he didn't sell his first piece of chicken until he was 62. And my favorite in this crowd is this guy right here, Michelangelo. Man, anytime you go to one of the world's leading museums, go to see sculptures, arts, paintings, sketches, drawings, all created by this guy. But the one thing that stays with me is this quote. I feel like I'm still learning. He said that at 87 years of age. Anybody in here over 87? No? Good, you still got a shot. Let me talk just a little about my new book, Permission to Dream. And I've got to tell you, man, released last year, selected by the Wall Street Journal as Book of the Month, was a finalist for an NAACP Image Award, didn't win, no problem, because I already got 2 of those. All right? Submitted for a Grammy, didn't win, no problem, we'll try it again. But the coolest thing that happened for me as an author, my mom used to always tell me, son, you need to be real careful who you're associated with. The coolest thing that ever happened for me as an author, I was just found out recently that I've been added to a list of banned authors by certain state prisons here in the United States. Some of the other banned authors on that list include Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Dr. Maya Angelou, and Nelson Mandela. So when your mama tell you, be careful who you're hanging out with, listen to her. And that book, man, is all about this whole idea of what can be done. There's no shortage of places that people are telling us all what we cannot do. I want to be the guy to talk about, well, let's talk about what can be. Let's talk about what's still on the table. And I'm doing this now globally. I mentioned my work in public education. We did 435 schools last year. We're doing it on 3 continents. Because dreams don't have borders. I started this whole effort a few years ago with my granddaughter. And I gotta tell you something. When you live long enough, been blessed to live long enough to meet that first grandchild, that changes everything. The first thing that changes is your child becomes obsolete. Somebody know what I'm talking about. Anytime I see my son without my granddaughter, I look at him like he owed me money. The other cool thing that happens when you become a grandfather, grandparent, you got this one person on the planet who believes that you are an honest-to-God superhero. My granddaughter, she thinks Papa Bear's the Black Panther. Papa Bear can do anything. I will never forget getting this phone call. I'm about to get on a plane. I'm flying to Malaysia. I'm going to be on this plane for 24 hours. But my granddaughter calls, I make him hold the plane. Papa, she wanted to tell me about this exciting thing they'd done at school that day. They had a substitute teacher, which means she and her fellow classmates basically took over the classroom. They made this mock-up of the Oval Office, or what they thought the Oval Office at the White House looked like. And they made this great big desk out of cardboard boxes. They sat there taking pictures, saying, I'm the President of the United States. That's cool. That's what you do in the 4th grade. But I get this call, Papa, you know the President, right? Yeah. Well, I want you to call him up. For what? I want you to call him and tell him I'm coming to the White House and I want to take a picture sitting at the big desk. Wait, let me make sure I get this right. You want me to call the President of the United States and tell him my 7-year-old granddaughter wants to come take a picture sitting at his desk. Tell him I'm 7½. Well, all right. That's going to seal the deal there, right? The other cool thing about getting to your 60s is, man, you're old enough to know better, but you're still young enough to say, why not? So I make the call. And I get a call back, come on down. And that, folks, is the backbone and the cornerstone and the bedrock of any dream. It all starts right there with permission to dream. And this last quarter, let me tell you something. You have to think about it for a second. At this point in her life, she was 7.5 years old. Her and her whole crew, meaning every other 7.5-year-old kid on the planet, that was the only president they had ever heard of or knew. In this last photo right here, this is where I knew I had created a monster. Right there. The President of the United States is explaining to this little girl, well, if you do real good in school and you do everything your papa tells you, in about 30 years, this office can be yours. And right there, she's saying to him, no, it's 28 and a half because I'm 7.5 years old. She got this thing figured out, man. One of the most important things that I'm doing with young people right now, this whole idea of talking about what can be. I stress to her, think about this for a second. Oprah Winfrey and I are the same age, same zodiac sign, and went to the same elementary school. How do we know the next Chris Gardner or the next Oprah Winfrey is not coming and going out of these same public school doors and public schools all across this country right now? The truth of the matter is, they are. My job is to let them know that they can. I've been challenged by some adults who ask me, what are the odds of you or Oprah Winfrey ever happening again? My answer is simple. I don't know. Because when you are on the journey to your dream, you don't focus on the odds, you focus on the evens. As in, even though, even if, even when, even where, even you, even me. Because when you change the dialogue, change the narrative, you can change the outcome. This has been done before, folks. And speaking with these young people, I gotta tell you, I'm doing high schools, middle schools, and upper level elementary schools. And you know the ones that scare me to death? Man, those 5th and 6th graders. They scare me to death. You know why? Because they ask you big people's questions and little people's Bibles. And this is where being a grandfather comes in handy, because you can put your answer through that grandfather's figure, that filter in your head. You can talk to an 18-year-old different than you can a 10-year-old. One of the most important things I'm stressing to young people right now is, this is not the time to disengage from your schools,